This photo walk today turned into some sort of a nature forest photo walk, even though I did not plan anything like this. Today it's absolutely beautiful summer day here in Helsinki, Finland. And on a day like this, you simply have to go out with your camera and grab a few pictures. But if on top of that you have a nice new lens, then no excuse is accepted. And yes, indeed, I do have a sort of new lens on my camera today. This is the Laowa 6mm f2 mounted on my Lumix GX9. This is a super wide angle for micro four thirds cameras, and this lens is a review sample from Laowa. And today I'm gonna have some fun with this super wide angle lens, because super wides are a lot of fun. They can be a lot of fun. This Laowa 6mm f2 is the widest normal rectilinear wide angle for micro four thirds cameras. There are some fisheye lenses with more angle of view, but as we all know, those fisheye lenses have that really strong fisheye distortion, which makes them more like special purpose lenses and not suitable for everyday photography like for example this Laowa, which does not have any distortions or very minor distortions that are hardly distinguishable if you look at your pictures. As all Laowa lenses, this is a manual focus lens. But other than that, this has a full communication with your camera body. So you'll get full EXIF data like aperture and the lens type in your image files. And that can be very useful later when you browse your photo library. You can see which lens you used and what aperture and so on. And another upside is, of course, that you can control your aperture from the camera with the camera dials. And every exposure mode works also. You can use P mode, A mode, M mode, and S mode because the camera can control the aperture of the lens because of the electronic communication. And that's really neat. And not nearly every manual focus lens has these features. Many manual focus lenses are fully manual and they don't have any communication with the camera body, and then you can't use for example P mode or A mode at S mode at all, and you will not see the EXIF data or you will not see the lens type and the aperture in your EXIF data. So I think it's a big upside that this lens can communicate with your camera body even though it's a manual focus lens. The build quality is really good, as it is with every Laowa lens, at least every Laowa that I've had a chance to test or try out. The materials are only metal and glass as far as I can see at least. The only moving part is the focus ring, which is really smooth and nicely damped. It has just about the perfect resistance to it when you try to turn the ring. There are hard stops at both ends of the focusing scale, of course, because this is there's some traffic noise coming. I'm actually not in the middle of the forest. There's a busy street right there. Anyway, there are hard stops at both ends of the focusing scale, which is nice and typical for a fully mechanical manual focus lenses. However, the infinity stop goes way beyond infinity. So if you turn the ring against the infinity stop, your photos are not going to be focused. They are out of focus everywhere. So with this lens you have to do some trial and error to find out where the real infinity is. On this particular copy it's right about halfway between the half meter and infinity markings. And when I set my lens there, I know that it's focused right to infinity. But this lens is not difficult to operate or focus. There is so much depth of field that unless you are shooting at a wide open f2 aperture, you can pretty much use the hyperfocal distance and just set a certain distance on the focusing scale and everything will be sharp from very close distance to infinity. So I don't think manual focus is any kind of reason not to want this lens. One more thing I forgot to say when I was talking about the build quality. This lens is not weather sealed, which to me is not a big deal, but to some it might be a big deal, especially if you shoot a lot in some sort of bad weather conditions, then it can be even a deal breaker. Super wide angles are nothing special anymore because almost every phone camera has some sort of super wide angle and people are so used to them. And as a matter of fact, for example, my iPhone 14 Pro has a super wide angle camera that has almost exactly the same angle of view as this Laowa 6mm, which by the way equals roughly to 12mm full frame lens. This Laowa 6mm f2 also makes really awesome looking sun stars. And if you are into sun stars and you like them, this might just be the perfect super wide angle for you. The sun stars with this lens, they are really pointy and really good looking. This lens also comes with a lens shade. But at first I thought it's a built-in fixed lens shade, because it was so firmly attached to the lens, but you can take it off. However, I would keep it on all the time because it can protect the bulging front element from scratches and hits and whatever accidents can happen when you are walking around with this lens. Because this lens can communicate with your camera body, you can choose to automatically activate the magnified focus view whenever you turn the focus ring, and that makes the focusing really super convenient compared to another fully manual lens that does not communicate with your camera body. With a lens like that, you'd always have to manually activate the magnified view, which makes the focusing a lot slower and not nearly as convenient as with a lens like this. The minimum focusing distance is 0.09 meters, 9 centimeters. And that is from the sensor surface, of course. And it's so close that I can almost touch my subject when I'm shooting at the minimum focusing distance, like for example this tiny little bug here. The light is not perfect, but I'm just demonstrating the minimum focusing distance here. But make no mistake, this is not any kind of a macro lens. Because of the extremely wide angle of view, the reproduction ratio is nothing that spectacular, even though the minimum focusing distance is quite minimal. There's no optical stabilizer built into this lens, but that's not a big deal with a super wide angle in general. And of course, most Micro Four Thirds cameras have a built-in stabilizer IBIS, like for example the GX9 that I'm using today. However, this particular GX9 does not have a stabilizer because, I don't know, there's something wrong with this camera. The stabilizer is somehow faulty. If I turn the stabilizer on, every picture turns out blurry. So unfortunately I can't use a stabilizer with this camera. When it comes to optical performance, I'd say this lens is very decent indeed, like pretty much every Laowa that I have ever tested. I did not do any formal testing, but based on the pictures that I have shot on this lens, I'd say the sharpness is very good, no distortions, and great sun stars and pretty good backlight performance. And all in all, I can't find many downsides regarding this tiny Laowa 6mm f2 lens. The only kind of downsides I can think of are the lack of weather sealing, which to me is not even a downside, but I know that to some it can be. And also maybe the manual focusing can somehow be a downside. Also, that to me is not any kind of a downside, especially with a super wide angle lens, but I know that some of you might want an autofocus lens. But I think all in all this is a great tiny super wide angle lens, and it's really tiny too, and that's definitely another upside. This photo walk today turned into some sort of a nature forest walk, even though I did not plan anything like this. My plan was to walk through this small patch of forest near my apartment to another area with more houses, more people, more urban life. However, there seemed to be so many interesting details here in the forest, and the light is quite nice, so I ended up just taking pictures here. And I hope you enjoyed this little forest photo walk with me and the Laowa 6mm f2 lens. And if you did enjoy this and if you found this useful or entertaining, please do consider buying me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below for that if you don't live in Finland. Thanks, and I'll definitely see you again in the next one.